We all quietly assume that as we get older, our bodies just naturally get weaker, especially when we hit middle age and our bodies suddenly start acting totally unfamiliar. We figure that our immune system is just failing because of age. But if you look at the actual clinical data for metastatic melanoma, that standard logic completely falls apart. The data reveals a really strange and terrifying truth. In young adults, the rate of skin cancer, or melanoma, is actually pretty low. Then suddenly, between the ages of 65 and 79, the risk for this cancer just spikes to its highest level. But the craziest thing happens right after that. Once you pass 80 years old, the risk of cancer and metastasis surprisingly starts to drop. Why does our body act so weirdly during this specific time of our lives? Maybe you are standing at a CVS pharmacy at 2 a.m. holding a long receipt, just wondering what is actually going on inside your body. We usually think getting older means automatically surrendering to cancer cells. But this whole phenomenon of cancer metastasis dropping after age 80 completely shocked scientists. They just could not figure out how a frail body at the end of its life was building such a strong defense against cancer. To solve this mystery, they looked at preclinical research. Usually, researchers run all their medical tests on 8-week-old young mice in the lab. But for the very first time, they started working with 8-week-old young mice, 12-month-old middle-aged mice, and 24-month-old geriatric mice. They injected melanoma cancer cells straight into the veins of the mice. The whole point was to track the metastasis in the lungs and liver really closely. They found that in the middle-aged mice, the cancer spread extremely fast and aggressively, because when you get older, like around 65, the body's immune system sort of starts acting a bit chaotic. Inside our lungs, we have a very specific type of security guard. Science calls these gamma delta T cells. These cells live right in our lungs from birth and are always ready to fight off any outside attacks. When we are young, these gamma delta T cells can quickly spot any tumor and just destroy it. But by middle age, these cells fall victim to a terrifying trick by the cancer. Melanoma cancer cells are actually incredibly smart enemies. When they reach the lungs or liver, they start making a specific protein called PROS1. This PROS1 protein acts like a biological villain inside our bodies. It directly attacks the gamma delta T cells in your lungs and completely shuts down their signals. When the cancer floods the area with this PROS1, your immune cells basically go completely blind. They just can no longer spot the dangerous tumor cells properly. As a result, our guard T cells cannot even reach those dangerous spots in the lungs anymore. So when scientists looked at this data, they figured maybe it was honestly, they had no idea why this was happening. They just watched in shock as the immune cell infiltration in the lungs of middle-aged mice basically hit rock bottom. The cancer cells then take full advantage of this blindness. They get the perfect chance to easily spread and metastasize everywhere in the body without any resistance. This is exactly why the cancer death rate for people between 65 and 79 is at its absolute peak. This is not just some normal physical weakness that comes with your age. This is a perfect biological trap the cancer builds directly against our own immune system. The scientists did not just stop at looking at this data. Down in the lab, they artificially increased the levels of that PROS1 protein inside the melanoma cells. Then they injected those highly active cells right back into the 8-week-old young mice. The results were honestly terrifying. Even though the young mice had completely healthy and strong immune systems, the cancer started winning. That extra PROS1 protein completely disabled even the young gamma delta T cells. Because of that, the cancer spread extremely fast into the lungs and liver of the young mice too. This means that rather than some standard age-related weakness in middle age, this trick by the cancer is far more responsible. Cancer does not actually exploit our age, it just blinds our guards. But the biggest and most beautiful twist in this story comes right at the very end of life. How does our body finally beat this terrifying trick by the cancer after we turn 80? How does a body that is supposed to be completely frail from age just stand back up to fight cancer? The scientists took a really close look at the data from the 20 to 24-month-old mice, which in human years equals roughly 80 years of age. They saw that in the lungs of these geriatric mice, the cancer metastasis was just not working at all. The number of tumor spots in their lungs was way lower than in both the young and middle-aged mice. The geriatric mice even fought the cancer off and lived much longer than the young mice did. While looking for the reason, the scientists discovered a completely new and unknown version of those gamma delta T cells. Once age hits its final stages, the gene expression inside these cells just completely changes. It is almost like these immune cells in the lungs realize that beating the cancer the normal way is impossible now. So purely out of a need to survive, they change their own structure and behavior. Inside the gamma delta T cells, there are a bunch of different subsets. Specifically, two subsets called V-gamma-4 and V-gamma-6 start working in a completely new way in the aging body. They drop that quiet standard security guard role and start directly attacking. They suddenly start making huge amounts of something different, what science calls interleukin-17A or IL-17A. This IL-17A is one of the most powerful and aggressive anti-tumor weapons our body has. When we are young, these gamma delta T cells usually just make other types of cytokines, but in an aging body, they basically turn into massive factories, making this IL-17A protein. When the melanoma cancer cells enter the lungs, these older T cells just directly swarm them. They show incredibly strong cytotoxic behavior just to destroy the tumor cells completely. They even ramp up the levels of a specific molecule called CD103 on the outside of their own cells. This CD103 molecule helps the immune cell lock incredibly tightly straight onto the tumor cell. That way the cancer cell cannot escape the attack at all. In hard science terms, this tight lock is called an immune synapse. The aging body just leaves absolutely zero room for the cancer to pull any tricks. When the researchers in the lab used an antibody to block this IL-17A protein in the geriatric mice, the old mice lost all their defense and started dying extremely fast. This means that this one single protein acts as the absolute biggest shield against cancer at 80 years old. They even tested injecting this IL-17A directly into the young mice from the outside. They saw that the young mice could suddenly build a much stronger defense against the cancer than before. Our immune system basically goes through a perfect evolution right at the very end of life. But is there some outside environment or bacteria driving this whole thing? We usually know that the bacteria in our gut and intestines control our immune system really deeply. Scientists call this the commensal microbiota. A lot of people figured that this special defense in the elderly probably comes from changes in their gut bacteria. To test this out, the scientists did something brilliant. They took the geriatric mice and kept them in the exact same cages as the young mice for 4 straight weeks. That way they would swap bacteria and their microbiomes would completely change. But after 4 weeks, they looked at the results and were just stunned. Even though their bacteria totally changed, the T cells in the lungs of the geriatric mice stayed exactly as strong as before. This is a completely internal, protective change written directly into our own cells. Our body actually chooses to make this change just to survive as we get older. Honestly, I cannot say why the human body waits such an incredibly long time to turn on this specific defense system. Maybe at some point in evolution, our body realized we need one final weapon at the end to get past the weakness of middle age. And so at 80 years old, your body absolutely refuses to surrender to cancer without a massive fight. Instead, it turns into the smartest and most aggressive fighter of its entire life. That sneaky +1 protein trick from the melanoma cells just cannot fool the older immune cells anymore. The gamma delta T cells break right through that protein wall, directly attack the cancer, and destroy it. We spend our whole lives used to viewing getting older as this terrifying chapter. We just figure age means our bodies slowly fading away or falling apart bit by bit. But this immunological data straight from the lab tells us a completely different story of courage. Our bodies were actually never designed to just give up. At 65, it might get temporarily confused by a new trick from the cancer, but by 80, it completely breaks all its own old rules to build a brand new defense system. Those invisible fighters inside your lungs prove that the human body is just not built to surrender. So getting older does not always mean getting weaker in every single way. Sometimes getting older means learning how to fight back far more fiercely than you ever did before. How does hearing about this hidden battle mechanism inside your own body make you feel? When did you first realize in your own life that your body was just not acting like it used to? Let me know your own experience with this down in the comments. And if you think this hard science might give some courage to an older person you know, definitely share this with them.